Okay, 10 o'clock, Mike. Shall we get started?
Let's get started. I just heard the gong ring someplace.
All right, everybody. Welcome to morning's presentation by the Minnesota Astronomical Society's Beginner Special Interest Group, also known as the BSIG. I'm Suresh Srinivasan. I coordinate the group for the club. A real treat today. We've got Mike Shaw, who's a real Renaissance man, I will say. This guy, when I recall, he has a PhD in like real stuff, and he had like a real career, and really sharp and really nice guy. Mike has become, to me anyway, probably the foremost landscape imaging specialist that I know. And what I mean by landscape is just taking a camera out on a tripod somewhere, say to a park or on the road somewhere, and mixing in a combination of landscape, i.e. like a building or a tree or animals, and something in the sky. And Mike is phenomenal at this. So I'm really excited to have him. Whenever we have him, he draws the biggest decent crowds we have. We're already over 50 people on this chat. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Mike Shaw.
Well, thanks, Suresh, and thank you for everyone for joining in this morning. It's always a little intimidating to hear that because it's like no pressure, but we'll do our best to provide some value this morning. And I also wanted to say thanks for finding us at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's certainly a little bit of an unusual time, but that's how things go. And as Suresh mentioned, I'm a really informal person, so if you have any questions or anything is not clear or you want me to go into something in more detail, please just type it into the chat. And as we're going to take a break periodically and come up for air, and we'll have a chance to go through that, because to me the best part about these webinars and presentations is the chance to interact and sort of talk amongst ourselves. So please don't be shy about that. Someone else, if you have a question, I guarantee someone else is going to have the question, and you'll help everybody out with that. So I'm going to try a few sort of new technology things here as an experiment, and I hope they work. And if they don't, I'm sorry, but we'll certainly do our best. And with that, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. And so I'm just going to kind of start the whole thing here, and hopefully it's not going to put things off too much. So let's go on to here, and we should be good to go. So Suresh, is that looking okay?
Looks great, Mike.
Great. Okay, well, as Suresh mentioned, we're really focusing on landscape photography or nightscape photography, or maybe just night photography, whatever it really is called. But isn't this example of the supermoon of last March setting over the St. Paul Capitol? The focus really is combining a night sky image with a foreground object. And the particular, look at this, isn't this a gorgeous shot? I mean, you can see the flags fluttering in the breeze. This was in the morning back in March. I call this the pre days, before times, because this was about 2 weeks before the pandemic lockdown really kicked in. Can you see my cursor on the screen?
Very small. Just move it around. Yeah, you're over by the moon now, right?
Yeah, very small.
Really tiny.
Okay, really tiny. Okay, thanks for that feedback. I'll remember that. I won't rely on it too much. So this video was picked up by the New York Post, and if you look at the bottom, it's always nice to see your name in print, The phenomenon was captured by local photographer Mike Shaw, who was lucky enough to spot the majestic moon in person. Well, I appreciate that, but luck had absolutely nothing to do with it. It was like 5 in the morning when I got there. So we're going to talk about how to set this up. So it's always kind of, interesting when you, it seems like there's a certain amount of luck with the weather, but I'm going to explain in this webinar how you can plan these types of shots with absolute certainty. So there's no ambiguity about any aspect really of the experience except for the weather. And so here is a crop of that shot. And I'm going to spend a couple minutes with this example just because it sort of nicely illustrates much of what we'll be talking about this morning. And so you can see the moon. This is right before it slipped behind the Capitol. And just by way of an example, if we fade this in with the prediction, this was the predicted position of the moon and the Capitol. with the exact same focal length lens from the exact same camera location a few miles away. And it's just remarkable. I mean, you can actually, if you look carefully, you can see the mare, you can see the various islands, the surface features of the moon are reproduced with incredible fidelity. So I'm going to show you how to do this with the Planet Pro app. So you can line up, moon rises and a bunch of other things using this app. And I hope to have some opportunities during the webinar to demonstrate this in real time, and maybe even take some on the fly. If someone has hey, let's plan this situation out. Maybe we can try that out and see how that goes. So this is a screenshot, just a screen grab from my phone from that event. So you can see the date there at the bottom, March 8th, 2020, right before things really got crazy. And there's a whole bunch of information on this screen, and we're going to go through it carefully, one block at a time, so you know and understand how this thing works, because it really is such a powerful tool and an essential ingredient in my planning experiences. And of course, the webinar is not limited to this particular app. There's a lot of the ethos and philosophy and so forth that goes into planning night photography shots. And as astronomers, we all have a lot of experience with this, so we're kind of a step ahead of the game in these kind of concepts. That prediction that you see here on the right is accessed from the screen on the left. And the screen on the left is actually the main planning screen that you will be using to plan your shots. And you can see these, as I've indicated, on the left with the building. That's a red icon. That's the, I'm going to talk about that. And then the camera icon on the right is where you're standing, or where I was standing on that morning. And then at the bottom, you can see the date and the time. You can see a bunch of other information. So the beauty of these planning apps, by the way, is, and this app in particular, is you can do these types of simulations, years in advance, literally years in advance, as you'll see a little bit later. We're going to search for certain events that are going to take place in the next 5 or 10 years, so you know when to start planning your vacation. And this isn't something where you have to be out in the field and then see what you can see once you're out in the field. This is quite the opposite. This is a planning app, so you can decide what phenomenon you're interested in, a meteor shower, maybe some star trails, or the Milky Way, or a moonrise, or really anything, a nebula, star cluster, anything like that, deep sky object. And anywhere in the world, pull up the map and have a look at it. So that's kind of what's going on with that. So just again to illustrate the power of this plan on the left, I had to scout around a little bit in the days leading up to the full moon. I knew I was interested in the Capitol building on the left, so that was a fixed object. But the question was, where should I stand? Where should I put the tripod to capture the supermoon sitting exactly behind the Capitol? And as you'll see, this is the spot that I chose, and this is the scene as I arrived. I set up my tripod. The moon is up in the sky. You can see it up there, nice and clear. It's a beautiful morning, thank goodness. You can see the reflections in the Mississippi River down there. You see the state capitol. And the question is, am I at the right spot? 5 minutes later, 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 5 minutes later. Oh, and it worked out just great. It's such an exciting experience to watch this planning pay off like this, because there really isn't anything like it. It always reminds me of like a science fiction movie, or something out of the future. But I'm going to show you how to do this exactly today. So that's the stage we just set for the discussion this morning. Excuse me. And again, if you have any questions or anything like that, just pop them in the chat, and we'll break periodically to see what's going on. This is the Red Barn at the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum. I teach full moon photography classes and a bunch of different online and in-person classes there. I've got one later this afternoon, in fact, on time lapses. And this was this. Oops. Oh, as you can see here on the left is the actual photograph, and on the right is the simulation. And the simulation you see here, pause for a moment, you see this rectangle. I actually entered that into the app. It's called a marker, and the beautiful thing is you can add any marker you want for any object, for your home, for anything really, and say, okay, that's the object I want to have in my shot. What's in the sky up behind it, and when should I shoot it with what lens, and all that good stuff. So here's another moon shot. This is one of my first super moon shots. This is back in 2012, in the spring of 2012. It's out in California. This is the tallest mountain in the United States. That's the biggest moon of the year. So I thought that surely was going to give me a retirement fund, and I'm still waiting for that. But on the right, you can see the details of the prediction as well. An 800 millimeter lens. You might be able to start noticing this. This is April 7th, 2020, so that's not exactly the when that was, but that's I think it was the preceding month. So, but in any event, it's not just this prediction is not just all about the moon. And a lot of times people, I mean, the moon is such an exciting thing to watch, but there's so much, as we know, astronomically, there's so much more in the sky. It's one of my favorite shots from a couple of years ago. It shows the constellation Orion, perfectly framed in the north window arch in Arches National Park. The great story behind this, the setting crescent moon is off to the right. It's given just enough, golden light to illuminate this arch. About 10 minutes after the shot, the moon set, and it was a completely different scene. And just as this was happening, this delightful couple came running up, and they said, "Hey, could you take our shot? Or could you take our picture in the arch?" And I was like, "No, absolutely!" I just flew out here, and it's like, "All right, my better self prevailed." And of course, as you can see, they made the shot, and I'm so grateful that they approached me in that moment because, and they persevered with me because I wasn't exactly super friendly, but I'm so grateful for them for that, and I always will be. And this is the simulation. As you can see, as we'll go through a little bit later, you can actually draw in a window that's offset from the ground by a certain height. I'll show you how I was able to do this. And then look, you can see Orion framed inside the window, and that's exactly what we wanted to get. Another example is up on the north shore of Lake Superior. This is Ellingson Island with some star trails arching over this, and you all know which direction I'm facing here. You can also see some airplanes in the sky, and there's a Laker, one of these ore tankers that came across the horizon and went behind the island as it was going into the Duluth Superior ports. And this is the simulation. This is a rough outline of what Ellingson Island looks like. This is a representation of what the star trails would look like from the spot where I put the camera. And then, as I mentioned, there's deep sky objects. I mean, you'll all recognize the Lagoon Nebula, the Trifid Nebula, and so forth in the Milky Way core area. And here it is in the prediction. There it is, the Lagoon Nebula and the various other nebulae, the Milky Way core coming up behind this exact peak. Look at the silhouette of the mountains here, and they line up incredibly well. So this is really the framework of today's presentation. We're going to go through how to use this app to make predictions like this so that you can capture those using your camera. I'm going to just pause. I've been talking into the screen for a minute. Suresh, everything looking okay?
Yeah, Hal is asking, where's that island? Where is that located?
Oh, this is Ellingson Island. This is just off, it's just south, actually, of like less than, I want to say a quarter of a mile, physically south of actually Split Rock Lighthouse itself in Split Rock Lighthouse State Park. So if you I'm standing on what's called Pebble Beach. There's a parking lot right behind me. And I'll show you the map. This is one of the, I believe this is one of the examples that, and if it's not, I can show you on the, anything else?
Yes, Robert is asking, how do you get the dimensions of the capital, etc., to plug into the app?
Excellent question. We're going to talk about that. Basically, there's a little bit of internet research and a little bit of trial and error and guessing and a little bit of actually matching the dimensions of your marker with the aerial photographs of the structures, which is probably the most reliable way to go. So in other words, when you zoom in on the Capitol in an aerial photo, you can see it, and you just match, when you add the marker, it generates a circle with a certain radius and diameter, and you just make sure that matches up with so this thing that you're seeing on the right is actually a disc. The two discs stacked on top of each other of a certain diameter.
So two other just comments.
Yes.
One quick one is, as Chris Sedness mentioned, if you're looking for this app that Mike is talking about, I found it in the Google store. It's called Planet, P-L-A-N-I-T, Planet Pro. And I see it listed for $9.99. Is that the right one, Mike? It
is. I have a special link that I'm going to provide in just a minute, but that's the one. Planitpro.
Do you know if that's on Apple, if it's in the Apple store?
It's on Google Play and Apple.
Okay. And then just another comment is, yes, we are recording this presentation, including the comments. So Vault's Tribers will be posting it onto our forum probably the next day or two. I should have mentioned that up front. So, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
All right, so we're all minding our manners for sure, but that's an excellent point. So thanks for all of that. Great. This is just the sort of thing that's helpful in guide. These questions and comments are so helpful. So please keep. If there's anything that's not clear, it comes to mind, please ask them so we can make sure that you get everything answered. So these are a couple examples we just enjoyed seeing, and as you can imagine, there's a great deal of planning that goes into them. And something I'm going to offer to you that I personally use myself, and you might find helpful, is what I just call my night shooting plan. It's it's not very imaginatively named, but that's what it is. And this basically starts around sunset, goes through midnight, all the way through into dawn. And then I just sort of make a list of the different projects I want to shoot that night, like the Milky Way, maybe the setting moon. Maybe I want to do some star trails. I want to capture Orion setting over the horizon. Maybe I want to capture the Lagoon Nebula coming up over the eastern horizon or southeastern horizon, all that sort of stuff. And then I write down, the camera details, etc. And then when I want to do these things and when I want to plan them out. Pretty self-explanatory, actually. But what I find is helpful about this is, at 1:30 in the morning, it's like, what was I going to do next? I mean, it's been up for a while, and I don't want to forget something. And then, so anyway, this is the sort of thing we're going to go through in some detail. So I'm not going to spend much time on this, but this is what I do full time. I'm a full-time astrophotographer, part of the Renaissance. I love that Renaissance career. I'm a book author. These are my 2 books on astrophotography. So if you're interested, they're on Amazon. You can get them at my publisher, Routledge, Focal Press. And if we were in person, I'd be happy to sign them for you. I've got some stuff going with the Adobe Photoshop Lightroom and the Brian Peterson School of Photography. Got Frank Kearney just mentioned, we do a show, Nightscapes, on slew.com, and recently become a delegate to the International Dark Sky Association. So this is really my hub of excitement and all that sort of stuff. So here are the main goals for today, briefly. It's all about planning night photography sessions. So what's a night shooting plan, why you need one, how to create one. I think you know why you need one now. And then I want to introduce this topic in red. I'm going to pause here again for a second, because this is something I think is especially helpful for both astronomers and photographers undertaking planning. And to distinguish between, it's not rocket science either, by the way, to distinguish between night sky priority and foreground priority planning, because there's a certain circular logic that can drive you crazy otherwise. And of course, we're going to talk about planning apps, particularly the Planet Pro app, and then hopefully to provide a little bit of inspiration and motivation for some of the great things that are out there. So this is top to bottom the outline for today. I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the power of pre-visualization and why that's so important. Talk a little bit about planning apps, and I'm going to go through sky priority and foreground priority planning, and then we're going to finish up talking about how you can create your night shooting plan. So if we were in person, I would hand you an index card right now, and I would say, I would like you to draw a nightscape that you would like to capture, or a landscape photography image. It could be really anything that captures your interest. And you might want to do this at home right now or sometime during this presentation. And I'm thinking something of this sort of caliber, not too detailed, but just maybe this example is, of course, of the Milky Way in between some trees and some mountains and that sort of thing. So once you've done that, or just in your head, and I think there's too many people to go down the list and ask, and I'd love to ask each one of you individually, but my question would be to you is, when you wrote that down, you sketched that thing out, what did you sketch first? When you sketched this, what did you sketch first? Did you sketch the mountains? Did you sketch the Milky Way? What was it that really was the thing that that was the that caused you to press that shutter button? And so the two things here are, if it was something in the sky, like I want to have star trails, or I want to shoot the Milky Way, or I want to shoot the moon over something, that's what I'm just calling a sky priority image, because the emphasis is on the sky object. It's the thing in the sky that you want to feature in your image. On the other hand, if it's like, oh, there's this beautiful, church out in this farm that's I just love driving by, or there's a waterfall that I really want to capture with something in the sky. That's what we're going to call a foreground priority. It's the thing that's on the ground that is the emphasis of the image. This is the Pueblo Bonita ancestral Puebloan structures in the Chaco Culture National Historical Monument in New Mexico. It's an incredible place to visit. And this was a workshop with a special permit. You're not allowed to go in after dark unless you're with a permit with a ranger. And it's just it was an incredible experience. And in this case, I didn't really care what was in the sky. I just wanted to capture something that's a starry sky. But on the left, obviously, I was fascinated with the galactic core region of the Milky Way. So that was my emphasis there. So back to you. Is your image a sky priority or a foreground priority image? That's the question you might ask yourself. And it's interesting because it's usually a pretty even split when we go around the group. All right, so talk a little bit about the difference between these. It's not complicated. Sky priority, you plan, you pick your object. Like I said, maybe it's a meteor shower, radiant, you want to have it at a certain point, or really anything. And then you get the date and the time when it's right where you want it to be in the sky, right? Then you find something to put in the foreground to complement that. And then you choose exactly where you want to be to capture that thing with the night sky image. So in contrast, this is a foreground priority planning approach. And here you select the thing in the foreground first. Then you say exactly where I want to put my tripod, because this is the scene I want to capture in this case. Right here in the middle, there's a north-facing wall, and I wanted to line up more or less with the Polaris, which is right here. And then you find something to put up in the sky that will appear in the sky that will complement that. I was actually making a star trail time-lapse sequence here. And then you get the date and the time when you're going to do your shot. So the key difference here is that, and this is the circularity in planning, is a lot of times people visualize let's say the Milky Way over this mountain, and either it's never going to be there, or it's like, I want to be there in July, and it's like, well, it's not going to be there in July, and it's like, well, and people go around in circles. So the only thing is, if it's a sky priority, just the takeaway is start with the date and the time, and then find the thing in the foreground, and it's vice versa for the foreground priority. So as I said, this isn't rocket science, but it really helps organize your planning when you're planning your shots, and that's what this thing is all about. So now let's talk about planning apps. Yes.
Mike, can I cut in? There's a couple of questions.
Yeah, please.
So David Gill asked a couple of questions, and maybe you'll get to this later, I don't know. Do you recommend the Planet Pro or the Planet Free app? Are you going to cover that later?
Planet Pro.
Planet.
Yep.
Okay, and then he also asked if you'll make the slideshow available. Now, David, just so you know, we are recording this, so you'll be able to watch the recording. It sounds like you want the slideshow as well. Mike, is that difficult to send over the slideshow?
Yeah, unfortunately, my publisher kind of really puts a limit on the amount of information I can send out digitally, but the recording's fine. But I would just encourage you to look at either of my books. I certainly talk about them there. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't.
Yeah, we'll have the thing. Yeah. And then Dilupala asked, the image that had Orion in the arch,
yes,
was that a sky priority or a foreground priority?
Great question. That was actually, to me, it was it was really a hybrid. It's kind of, and it's like, well, thanks, Mike. That doesn't help at all. But it was, I love rock arches, but I also love Orion. And so it was really kind of like this forced marriage between both of them. I would probably call that a foreground priority image, because it didn't have to be Orion. I just wanted something in the arch. And so I would tilt the scale towards a foreground priority. Other people who really love Orion would be like, well, it's a sky priority because I want to get a picture of Orion and need something neat to do with it. And so there's a certain amount of of that. But I started with the rock arch because that's where I really wanted to. I just love rock arches. Great question.
Yeah, we're caught up now on the questions, so please go ahead.
Great. Okay. So these are the three primary, photography planning apps. Photographers Ephemeris on the left was the first one, and these are screenshots from Cove Point up by Beaver Bay on the North Shore, and you can see they all look kind of similar in a lot of ways. And I just happen to be a huge fan of the Planet app because of its capabilities that neither of the other two have, but the other two have some capabilities the Planet doesn't have. So of course I have all three of them on my phone, but I spend 90% of my time with the Planet app. If you would like to get it and you haven't downloaded it since, you can get it using these links. You can just type these in, depending on which system you're using. And I think this is the most recent logo. They've changed it a few times, but this is the app that we're talking about. So I'll give you a minute to write those down. And I'm going to say on the next slide, I would really, for the next sequence of things, we're going to go through a lot of things in details. And if you're new to this, I really would, I would just not worry about specific keystrokes, but just learning what you can do. What can this thing do? What can I use this for? And then once you figure out what you want to use it for, you can easily go and figure out how to do that using some video tutorials I'm going to show you how to find and use. So again, I wouldn't spend a lot of time getting caught up in the details of the keystrokes. Where can I get those free video tutorials? Right here on my website. If you go to my website, there's a guides in here, pull down menu, Planet Tutorials. Click on that. That takes you to this page. And there's a whole list of them. You scroll, this is the top of the page. And if you scroll down, this is a list of some of the ones that are available that you can access and learn from. So, and to be honest, I actually created these in collaboration with the Planet developers. And they're actually used under this question mark on the app now. So I think you'll find them helpful. So
hey, Mike,
oh yes, please.
Real quick, I didn't hear, maybe you said it. What is your website?
Oh, of course you know my website. It's MikeShawPhotography.com. It's just my name, Mike Shaw, and the word photography.com. And so you go there, and it's just the top menu here. Thanks, Suresh, for that. I always need help with that. So again, the next several slides, just follow along with the general trend of things. Then we're going to get into some examples, but I want to go through what's actually on these screens when we're looking at them. And probably the most important thing is where are you with your camera? And that's shown by the blue icon with the camera. Sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's black, but it's a little icon with a camera in it, and that's the camera location. And what you'll see right away are these lines that are coming out of this camera location. We'll get to those in just a minute. Now, the moment you assign your camera location, and this is something that you assign, I'll show you how to assign this. Once you assign, it doesn't always have to, well anyway, once you assign this camera position, then up here, circled in red, is the latitude and the longitude and your elevation. So this is your three-dimensional coordinates on the planet Earth. And this is what the app uses to do all the calculations for all of the planning that it does. Is your position. So that's probably the most important thing. And then these lines that come out of the position, because they're so, commonly used, relate to sunrise, sunset, and moonrise and moonset. So this is kind of like the default view of the camera position. The orange and yellow ones are sunrise and sunset. So the light, this one over on the right is the sunrise, on the left is sunset, and then blue is moonrise and dark blue is the moonset. And in fact, you can see that all three of these apps use the same color scheme. And again, the Photographer's Ephemeris was the first outfit to develop this. So credit to them. Going back to this, though, I just want to say a few words about azimuth. And I'm going to be using the word azimuth a lot. Astronomers, we use this all the time: altitude azimuth, right ascension, declination, and so forth. The azimuth is your compass direction. And what compass direction are you facing? Are you facing northeast? That would have an azimuth of 45 degrees. Southwest, that would be whatever that is. Northeast, or northwest, 350, maybe it is. My math is what it is. But the thing is that if you think of this compass rose as having a red cross on it, then that red cross is the same red cross as Planet and all the other apps use for your camera position. So, 0 degrees is 0 degrees on your app, on this little map. 270 degrees is over here on the left, and 180 degrees is down here. So you can see these lines really indicate an angle. So for example, sunrise, which is labeled up here in the upper left, sunrise is an azimuth of 103.6 degrees on this day at the bottom, February 23rd, 2019. And that's the angle between north and this line that corresponds to sunrise. Sunset has an azimuth over here at 256.6 degrees. Moonrise is that, moonset is this. And as you know from your astronomy, these things don't always line up quite like this. Every month they're a little bit, every day they're a little bit different. But in this day and year, that's how they came to be. So, you know, all of that information is encapsulated on the screen. That's really all that we have on the screen is the date and the time, which, by the way, you can adjust down here on the slider. You can put your finger down here and slide it back and forth. You can actually tap on the date and send it any date you're interested in. And so you have your location and the sunrise and the sunset and the moonrise and the moonset. So we're good to go. Now, the thing is that there are many other app tools in this app. This was me on that Arch day pondering my future with the Orion. You can see the Pleiades coming up here. I think you can see the belt of Orion. You can see the Hyades right in here. Anyway, all right. So what we've been talking about, well, anyway, let me pause here for a sec. Any questions popping up on anything on that?
I don't see anything in the chat. Does anybody have any questions right now? I think we're good, Mike.
Good. Okay, great. We'll plunge ahead. All right. So this is the screen that we've just been looking at. It has the azimuth and time for sunrise and sunset, and the lines that correspond to it. Well, it turns out that if you look very carefully along this top here, you can see this little row of colored rectangles. And this one on the left is shaded solidly because that's the one that we've been using. Each one of these is a different tool. And in fact, if you see this little white caret right up there, just above the row of rectangles, and you swipe down on that, you access this ephemeris page. It's a temporary pop-up that has all the other tools listed. And each one of these tools corresponds to a rectangle in this row of icons. So, there's 5 of these orange ones with the sun and moon. These are these 5. There's 5 corresponding to night photography. There's a dark sky page. There's a bunch of photography ones here, and then meteorology over here on the right. So there's really quite a wide variety of different tools that this app has. And I've just been blown away at how valuable this is and how useful this is and how integrated it is into a single app that is so useful in the field. I mean, I use this for so many different things on so many different occasions. It's just, I'm a huge fan. All right. So anyway, so we were using this rise and set tool, but now let's use this sun and moon position tool just for fun. So when we tap on that, look, we get a whole new set of information up here on our home screen. So to emphasize the difference, what we were looking on the left, a lot of this stuff, it kind of blends together because there are numbers and angles and all that. On the left, we were looking at the sun and the moon rise and set tool. On the right, over here, we're looking at the position tool. And you can see this icon is shaded in, and now all this information up here has changed. And in fact, what this is telling you, in case you're interested, is on this day, February 23rd, 2019, at 8:45 in the morning, the sun has an azimuth of 124 degrees, because now it's moving across the horizon, and it's an elevation angle of 16 degrees. And by the way, the moon is also above the horizon. It's about to set, but it's a gibbous moon that has an altitude of 5 degrees and a azimuth of that. And so sometimes that's very useful if you want to know exactly where the, there's the moon for you. But there's a bunch of other tools. There's the Milky Way tools you'll see here, a bunch of other things like that. So play around with these different tools. On any tool, I will say again, there's a little question mark icon down here. You can tap on that, and there may be a video tutorial that was embedded in the app that's going to help you that sounds a lot like my voice. I'll just say that.
So, Mike, we just got questions that just popped up. Ron Schmidt's asking, so the software gives you a heading, but how do you find your compass bearing when you're on site? Is it digital or analog?
Oh, that's a great question. So I actually use I've got an old-fashioned, handheld compass that I use because that thing is the most accurate. But I want to be sure I'm understanding Ron's question. So you can...
Ron, you want to speak up maybe on this one?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike. I've used this app before, actually the TPI app, and it gives you the angles that you need to look, but then when you're on site, how do you know where that angle is? And I've never found a digital compass, especially ones on phones, that actually work.
Oh, for sure. I couldn't agree more. So I'm actually, I'm tempted to interrupt the thing and show you my compass. Let me show you that when we take a break. But I agree, and I always just use a compass, like a physical compass with a magnet. And it's an orienteering compass with a declination adjustment, because the problem is that your phone is an electromagnetic device, and it's never been as reliable as just an actual compass that I use.
Yeah, the saying is typical with cameras, but it works for compasses too. It's not the compass you have, but the compass you have on you.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
And so I always find myself in need of a compass, and I don't happen to have it in my pocket, and then I pull the phone out, and then I get frustrated and go, these things don't work.
Well, I tell you, this is a very important point, Ron, that you're bringing up here, and this goes to why I think the Planet app is the way to go with these planning exercises, because if we look at this Milky Way example, for example, and the azimuth for this particular instance is this angle, that's a good place to start. But what you'll see is that when the exercise I'm going to show you, when this app actually produces those virtual views of what you're going to see through your camera, it accesses Google Maps in a three-dimensional topographical database, and it actually builds in the actual, I don't know if you remember seeing those simulations. It shows the mountains and the valleys and everything that you're going to see based on the actual landscape. And so what I mean by that is you can actually then say, okay, as one example, I was doing a workshop in California a couple of years ago, and this person really wanted to get the moon rising behind, the moon was coming, it was a gibbous moon coming up over a ridge, and there's a tree on the ridge, and he really wanted to get, it's like, I've never been to that tree. It's a ridge that was about a mile or so away. But we found that tree, there was a tree just by itself on this ridge, on the aerial view of Google Maps on Planet. And so we put a marker on that tree, and we got in our position based on all of this stuff, and lo and behold, we had to move like about a half a foot to get it exactly centered in the tree when the thing came up. And the power is that you don't have to rely on a compass because you're accessing the map database using Planet.
Right. The problem I had was I had a sky priority, and I didn't have any on the horizon. There was no reference.
Oh, Minnesota. Yes.
Typical Minnesota horizon.
Right. Yeah. So I tell you, I carry these. I just probably have. Some people carry around half a dozen flashlights. I have a half a dozen compasses all over the place. That because you're right. It can be one of those things. So definitely so.
Great. It's good to hear someone's out there still using analog. Thanks, Mike.
Oh yeah, you bet. Right.
Mike, we got a couple more. I'll just ask. I think of the quick ones first.
Sure.
Steve Schmidt, no relation to Ron, I believe, asked, "Does Planet require an internet connection since the maps are shown?"
No, you can use it once you've loaded everything in. You can use them offline very reliably.
And then I think he makes a comment right after regarding maps. He says, "Not maps, but satellite imagery." I think he's referring to Google Maps, I believe.
Oh yeah, very nice. Good point. I can.
Satellite. And then David McGill asks, how do I turn on the red azimuth line?
Oh, you go to PowerPoint and draw them in by hand.
I'm
being facetious. I'm so sorry. They're not there. This is a total artifact that I'm using to. I don't mean to be facetious at all. It's an excellent question, but they're not part of the app. That's just me doing that in PowerPoint to illustrate things.
And then Matt Fritz asks, seems like you could use the app to figure out when an existing photo was taken. If it contains sky features, how far back in time can you go?
Pretty far. I think I was just doing this thing. That's a great question. I don't want to digress too much, but there was a ranger in the Grand Canyon who contacted me about a year ago about a couple of explorers whose name escaped me now, but they saw the Brooks Comet in 1911. And they wrote an account of this in their diaries. They went down Desolation River in southern Utah. And so we kind of pieced together where that comet would have been in the sky. And I actually used the Planet app with going back to 1911. And it didn't have the comet in the database, but I was able to figure out where in the sky it was near. It was actually near Corona Borealis, if I remember correctly. And we were able to find the constellations using the branch extension of the declination to say, and we were able to, go back to 1911 at this particular spot. So we scouted around these different spots on Desolation River. Where am I going to be able to see the horizon because of these mountains? It's in kind of a deep valley. We found a couple of spots where, sure enough, if they camped there, they were likely spots to camp based on the journal entries that they would have been able to see the comet. So we were able to verify their account.
Interesting. I'll ask a quick question myself. Does this app show altitude? The reason I ask is if now that drones are becoming more popular,
yes.
If people are using a drone and they're up, 300 feet, will the app, is there a place to adjust the app to show that? It really
sure is.
The target.
Sure is. Yeah, in the settings, there's a thing where you can say camera height above the ground. And there's actually a drone tool in here that I don't have any slides on, but I can just illustrate later. And also if you click on this icon up here in the upper left, one of the map descriptions shows a topographical map. There's a series of them. You can have a satellite view, a regular map view, a hybrid, and then a terrain map, which is basically a topographical map.
Very cool. Thank you, Mike. I think we're caught up on questions.
Yeah, these are great questions. So, and I think to me, this is the main point of this discussion. So there's no rush. And, I've got a ton of stuff, but, we'll just see where we go and where it goes from here. So I want to talk briefly about, that was a brief intro to planning apps. Don't worry, we're going to come back to them. But I want to go through a sky priority planning exercise. And again, we're going to start with a date and a time. I think I may skip over these next planisphere slides a little quickly, but if you've never used one of these old school, no internet required, no electricity required, you can actually draw them yourself. They're so valuable. There's the horizon, the North Star. You can put in a date and a time. You can find these constellations. They match up. All kinds of good stuff. But the point I want to make here is that you can actually use these to, where's a good example of, like if I wanted to shoot, let's say, there's a good example, the Big Dipper over the northern horizon. This planisphere tells me the dates and the times when it's going to be there. And I'll give you a couple more examples of this when we plan the Milky Way out, so you can see what I'm talking about. But if you've never used one of these, I would buy one. And much of the stuff we're talking about, here's that orienteering compass that we were just talking about in the headlamp. If you go to my website, mikeshawphotography.com, there is a link called Guides and Gear. And if you go down to the sublink that's called Photography, Astronomy, Expedition Gear, and Books, I've got a page where it's basically like a store of stuff that you might find useful. And it's an Amazon affiliate thing. I get a small percentage. I would encourage you to start here and then go buy something really expensive, because I'll get a percentage of that as well. Someone bought some stand-up paddle boards, and it's like, that's great. Anyway, so seriously though, you can get a planisphere here. There's one listed, and they're, I think, on the order of $10 or $20, but or you can just search on the web DIY planisphere and get some links that will help you with that. So, all right, so let's do a case study here. So here's the Milky Way in my planisphere, and I've highlighted this. I've highlighted the Milky Way here, just roughly where it is. And I want to have the Milky Way over the southwestern horizon, like I've shown here. So my first question is, this is a sky priority. You can see it in the background. I want to shoot this shot. I want to create this shot. It's in my head. So it's what I drew in my sketch. How am I going to plan for this? And so I know that that's where the Milky Way is. So this is a sky priority image. So I put the Milky Way where I want it to be. It's right there. And now the question is, what are the dates and times when I can shoot it? Well, that's where this beautiful tool comes in so helpful. Any combination of these dates and times will work. I've just circled, I guess, 5 of them at random. July around midnight, August around 10 p.m. Everything sets a little bit, so September around 8 p.m. And any of those will do. And so the question is, and you can also, plan the Big Dipper, observing Cygnus and so forth. And so this is when, now that you have these, dates and times in mind, you can then go to Stellarium and start to maybe fine tune things a little bit. So if you've never used Stellarium, this is a very powerful and free piece of software that gives you all kinds of detailed astronomical information and planning capabilities and all kinds of things like that. So with that, here are the summer months, May, June, July, and August at these different times. And you can see that the Milky Way is probably already, I mean, most people, I'm sure most of you already know this, but it's in the exact same position, just at different times on these different months. In August, it's here at 9:30 at night. In May, it's there at 3:30 in the morning, so at very different times. But you can find this out just like the planisphere told you, and go from there. So I kind of like July. I mean, July's, ice is going to be gone, bugs might be gone, and the nights are getting a little bit longer. So let's go with July around midnight. So we're going to choose that. And now we want to pick a place. So we've got our sky priority image. And now we're going to look at some place. We're going to start here in the U.S. just because we're here in the U.S. Where are we going to go? Well, interestingly, I don't know if I mentioned this, but this little green arc is planet's way within the Milky Way tool of showing where the Milky Way is going to be. It's kind of like a upside down salad bowl, arcing overhead. And these are just 3 different places: Madeline Island in Wisconsin, Big Bay State Park. That's a good spot if you want it to be over water. Hollow Rock, Minnesota, it's a great location over water. But Boulder Lake, just north of Duluth, not so great because this is just over a bunch of trees, which is interesting, but that's not what we have in our mental sketch of this over the water. So we're going to go back to Split Rock Lighthouse State Park and again go to Pebble Beach. So this is, you can see here, Ellingson Island. The actual lighthouse is off the screen to the upper right, just here a little ways. You can walk. It's an easy walk along this little. This is a little footpath to this other viewing area over here, and there's a parking lot right here. We're going to go through this in some detail. Okay, so we're going to get into the weeds a little bit, planning our July Milky Way shot over Ellingson Island. So that's our task at hand. So let's look ahead to this coming summer. This summer, July of 2021, we've all been vaccinated. Every life is back to normal. And the new moon is Friday, July 9th in the month of July. That's a good time to do this type of photography because the sky is very dark. And we're quite confident the skies will clear as well. So here's what we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do is this is the view of this area. This is a map view of this area. Now we're going to go to the satellite aerial imagery of the same area. And the first thing you want to do, I'm just going to walk you through this. And again, I wouldn't necessarily follow along with this because it might get lost and then irritated. You can see what this thing does, and then you'll have plenty of time to practice, hopefully. So you first off start by tapping this little plus button, and that brings up this submenu, so to speak. And then you're going to pick this one right here, which is called Set the Scene Location. And when you click on that, you're going to get this little red icon, and then you just push on that and hold it until it sits over the Ellingson Island, and that you basically told Ellingson Island that's the thing that you're interested in. And this is when you can add a marker, as I think I've done in this instance, in this example. We're going to maybe talk a little bit in detail about. There's always a level of how much detail you go into it. But in any event, so you set that to be the scene location. That's good. And you tap that plus button again, and then you bring up the same submenu. And this time we're going to set the camera location to be up here. Now, the moment you do that, up come our sunrise and sunset, moonrise and moonset lines. You can see they're totally different than the earlier example because now it's the middle of the summer, so the sun is rising and setting very far to the northeast and northwest, as is the moon on this day. We also see this green fan, and this green fan indicates the camera's field of view. If you look very carefully right here for a particular focal length lens, that's a lot of information right there. We have a date and the time, July 9th, 2021, 11:30 p.m. We have a location right here on the shore of the state park. There at 11:30 at night. We have a 14 millimeter lens. We're aiming it towards Ellingson Island. That's where we put our scene pin. And this green fan is telling us what the camera sees. So that seems pretty useful. All right, so what do we do next? Well, next up is we've done that, so that's a thing. The next thing we want to do, and this is where I want you to hold on to your seats if you've never seen this before. this thing is you click on this little viewfinder icon down here. This is the real, value added of this webinar, I think. You click on this little viewfinder icon, that pulls up this little set of menus down here on the left, and then also this set of viewfinders up here on this vertical view. And the one you want to click on is the Viewfinder Vr, like that. So tap on that. I don't know, you ready for that? Bam! Look at that. That planet is telling you this is what you're going to see standing there. You can see the island right here. It's a marker I just made. I mean, how great is that? I mean, that's just phenomenal. Because this is, you can actually see a little contours of the local terrain. This is the the Iron Range of the North Shore. This is Lake Superior. It's curved because it's a wide-angle lens. I mean, it's incredible that you have that ability. And you might, and this is how I actually blew that up from the screenshot. This is what you would actually see on your device. Again, this is with the purple icon right here, highlighted for the Milky Way Seeker. And you can see this is the virtual viewfinder for a 14mm lens at this location. And you know what? You might say, I don't like it over here. I want to change the time. Easy to do. Just come down here to the bottom, and right here on the left is one I just showed you at 11:30 p.m. Off to the right is, you can just slide this slider with your finger back and forth. This is at 1:45, and you can see how the Milky Way actually moves position. Maybe that's a better position for where we're standing and so forth. So to reiterate, though, this is the power of this app. It actually draws from the Google Map database your local position. It's a database of astronomical objects and so forth, and puts it all together into a very user-friendly way. So you can say, and it's easy to adjust the position of these pins. You can move the camera position around. But again, if you want to access, I'm going to pause. This is what we have for our map view. If I want to get this virtual viewfinder view, I just come down here to the viewfinder button, tap on it, and select Viewfinder VR. And it was when I saw the virtual viewfinder feature of Planet that I remember I was on a treadmill at a gym, and I was like, someone told me about this app, so I was like going through the things. I was like, holy moly, this is incredible. So anyway, there it is. Yes.
Hey, Mike, Hal's just asking you, this is Planet Pro you're showing, right?
Correct.
Okay, yep. Yeah, Hal, that's the app.
Yep.
Thank you.
You bet. And so now, as I indicated, this is the 14mm view. Suppose we want to go to a different focal length. Well, if you literally tap on this blue 14mm icon, up comes this list of all these different focal lengths. You can scroll down; it goes all the way up to like 1,000 millimeters. In fact, you can enter in your own value, and we're going to choose, let's say, 50mm. So come down here and choose 50mm. Tap on that. Look at this. This is the viewfinder you get now. It's totally different because you've zoomed in. I mean, this is the beautiful thing about being able to plan, is you can decide exactly what you want your image to look like, and you can position your camera at these different locations. I mean, it's not easy at 1 in the morning traipsing around on the North Shore of Lake Superior and trying to figure out where to put your camera and stuff. And it's way better to have a good sense of everything that's about to transpire before you take off. So,
hey Mike, there are 2 more quick questions.
Yeah, please.
So Hal followed up. So I think what he's asking here is this from a tablet, phone, or laptop?
This one right here is a tablet shot, and it's as far as I know, for better or for worse, there is no laptop version available. So you got to get it on your smartphone or tablet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you got anything else? Good. Okay. Well, let's just keep plunging ahead, and we're doing just fine. So this is how the shot came out, and everything pretty much matches up. I mean, give or take. So you have the Milky Way, you have Ellington Island, you have the shore, predictions, Stellarium. Everything's pretty great. So that's those are the basic steps of going through a sky priority image. But now let's go through a foreground priority image, because this is a little different for astronomers typically, because the sky planning is like, I do that every night I go out observing. But we want to look at this Canal Park moonrise that was on May 3rd in 2015. I can't believe it was that long ago already. And This was, again, one of these full moons. I can't remember if this was a super moon. It might very well may have been. But let's see how the planning of this took place. So I think probably most of you are familiar with Duluth, Canal Park in particular. And boy, I tell you, look at those people without masks on. It looks kind of crazy, doesn't it? Boy, I tell you, it will be back there soon. Anyway, I'm going to digress. So here's the aerial view, satellite view of the North Pier in Canal Park. Here's the lift bridge, right just there. At the end of this pier, and then to both of these piers, there's a lighthouse, and this is the lighthouse in question right here. So this is an aerial view of the lighthouse at the end of the pier. And so here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a marker to this lighthouse. And if you look very carefully, when you add the marker, you can assign it to be a building up here on the right. This is the screen that pops up when you go to add the marker. And when it's a building, excuse me, you can actually assign some dimensions. And in this case, I tried to look this up on the web. I think I actually found some information on this, but I assigned it a diameter of 50, or sorry, a height of 50 feet and a diameter of 8 feet, which seems a little narrow, but that's fine. And when I did this, you can see the width of 8 feet, which seems terribly narrow now that I think about it, produces an 8-foot circle, which doesn't quite match the diameter of the lighthouse. But I think I just wanted to, get something in there that was at this right spot at the, maybe to better be too small than too big, but in any event, and if you don't like that, you can say, well, I want to type in 12 feet or 16 feet, and the circle is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger until you are happy with how you think that circle should represent whatever it is that you're looking at. In this case, a lighthouse. Okay, so we've assigned a marker to that, and we're going to assign our scene pins. That's like we did before. We tap the plus button and assign the scene pin to that location. And now the question is, where along this boardwalk should we stand so that the moon is going to come up behind the lighthouse? Because remember, the whole point of this is that you don't want to wait until you see the moon and then put the camera there, because the moon's already come up. You want to catch the moon as it's coming up, but you can't see it because it hasn't come up yet. So that's the whole point of this whole exercise. So let me ask you, this is what I would, if we were doing a real presentation with a group, I'd say, would this position work right here? And you would say, no, it's not, it totally would not work, because the moonrise is going to miss the lighthouse. What are you talking about? It's going to be a mile off. All right. How about this one on the right? Well, this is way better, because this is the sort of place where the moon this blue moonrise line actually passes through the lighthouse marker. And so you would think this is a better sort of location for where you would stand for your camera. All right. So we've done that, and now let's do our planning with our virtual viewfinder. So again, we tap down here on the viewfinder icon, and we choose the virtual viewfinder. Let me just say briefly, this augmented reality viewfinder is helpful if you're in the field, and you're standing there and you can actually look through your camera and superimpose things. Street View is a historical thing. It used to be you could go to Street View and Google Maps and do that. Can't do that anymore. Viewfinder Picture is you can actually take a picture with your camera and then do some planning with that. But that's all I really want to say at the moment about that. We're going to choose the virtual reality viewfinder, and lo and behold, there's our scene pin, the little red thing, and our lighthouse. And this is the marker that we inputted with the dimensions of 50 feet tall by 8 feet in diameter. So now what are we going to do? It's super easy. Now we just simply say, okay, well, at 7:50 p.m., the moon hasn't come up yet, but at 8:06 p.m., as you can see here on the bottom, this is where the moon's going to be coming up, and that's where I wanted it to be. So I was happy with that. And in fact, as the evening progressed from 8:06 to 8:09 to 8:12, you can see how quickly the moon travels away from the lighthouse up in the sky, and this all came together in this shot. And it's just too hazy to see the moon down here, unfortunately, but nonetheless, that's how that goes. So the point is, once you really see the power of this, it's easy to add icons for Ellingson Island or for a lighthouse, and you can actually plan out the moon rise for any date and time you're interested in. So I can say more about that in a little bit. But the next thing I want to do, though, before we leave the lighthouse. Oh, yes.
Sorry, I was just cutting. We had two questions real quick.
Sure.
Chris White asks, in terms of focal length, do you have to enter your sensor? You have to enter your sensor information of your digital camera, or do you have to convert it to a full-frame digital sensor?
Great question. And you enter your particular camera. When you set up the app for the first time, there's a settings menu, and you enter the type of camera you have, full frame, crop center. There's some models that are in there, and you also enter in the height, the typical height. When you hold your camera at your eye level, how high is that above the ground?
Great. And then Hal asked, do you sell your pictures? Because he's looking for a frameable copy of your Ellington Island photo.
Oh, sure. Yeah. In fact, thanks for asking about that. If you go back to my website, mikeshawphotography.com, and you go to, there's another tab that's called Galleries, and I have a bunch of images on there that you can just purchase straight off the website. And I can't remember if the Ellington Island one is up there or not, but I'll be sure to make sure it's up there by the conclusion of today. But thanks so much for asking about that, because I certainly love selling images, and normally in a situation where we're in person, I'm happy to sign them for you and that sort of thing too. So absolutely.
So Hal, this is still Planet Pro, right?
Correct. All of this is Planet Pro.
Yeah, Hal was asking. Michael Cowper asked, is this multiple exposures or is it layered in Photoshop?
Oh, that's a great question. So yeah, so what I do, this is layered in Photoshop, actually. And it's using the light and blend command. So what my typical approach is to take a sequence of images, usually about every 10 or 15, well, I think probably about, for a moonrise, about every 15 seconds, 4 images per minute. And then, so I do that from, 10 minutes before first, appearance of the moon above the horizon, all the way through until I know it's way out of the frame. Then I go back and I look at the images, and I pick images that are roughly 5 minutes apart for this type of spacing. And I pick a beginning image. One of these images is like, well, that's the image I want to have at that particular location. So then I kind of back 5 minutes away from that image, either backwards or forwards in time. And I select the other 5 images. I export those. So I don't know if you saw the very beginning of the talk today, I had the images of the St. Paul moon approaching this Capitol building. Those are the actual images I then use. I use the light and blend mode. I imported those into Photoshop as a layer stack, and then use the light and blend mode to blend all of the moons into the final image, which was the brightest one.
Cool. Mike, we're at the top of the hour right now. Were you planning to do like a 5-minute break, or what do you want to do?
Great question. Let's take a 5-minute break. I think that that's a great idea. So I'll just sit here and take questions, or let's take a 5-minute break. It's an excellent idea, Suraj. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to chime in.
Let me stop presenting a minute so we can all
Balls is asking, do you recommend bracketing exposures?
Great question. So for a moonrise, absolutely. Well, okay, here's the thing. So generally, yes. I mean, for a moonrise, I always do bracketing because I'm not quite sure which of the ones is going to be the best because the light's changing so quickly. But for a composite, like I was just showing, it's very important to keep the same exposure for all the images to blend them together. Otherwise, the moon's going to look a little funky.
Anybody else have a question for the moment? All right, we'll just hang out then. Give people a chance at the bathroom.
Yeah.
Like 10 minutes or something.
That sounds good.
So, Mike, how long have you been doing this?
Well, that's a great question. I've been doing this in some form or another all my life. My family of photographers. My mom was really into flower photography. My dad was into flower photography, nature photography, and really got into the night side of things. Probably the very earliest ones was right around the late 1990s or turn of the century type time frame. And professionally, it's been a switch about, I would say, in the last 10 years is when I really started doing this full time professionally as a career. So I mean, I do a lot of workshops and all this sort of stuff, but
Mike, can I ask just basic photography stuff, shutter speed? Are you going with the shortest shutter speed you can to eliminate movement effects, or does it matter? An aperture, what do I want to use to shoot this kind of moonshots?
Yeah, great question. So when the rising full moon, if you're using a long lens, then you want to have as short of a shutter speed as you can get by with. It's right. The full moonrise is one of the most challenging things to shoot, basically. And so, because the full moon is basically high noon, a daytime. So, you're shooting it at sunset, so the foreground's going to be very dark. So to answer your question, I usually limit my exposure time, my shutter speed to like a half a second max with a wide angle lens, and then for a long lens, I try to keep it to like 100th of a second, or just as short as I can, because you're quite right, as the moon's moving, it's going to become blurry.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I was going to mention this at the end, but since we still got a minute here, so Mike actually teaches classes, right? So I don't know, is your website up to date? So do you have your schedule?
It is, yeah. I mean, there's right now, it's obviously everything's got it online. Thanks for asking that. I do have a sold out class this summer in California for the Perseid meteor shower. That's like the earliest in-person class that I'm still going with. But yeah, I do like a bunch of very regular online webinars, and I'm doing an informational one this coming Monday. If any of you are interested, you can just drop me a line and I'll give you the details on what to shoot in the night sky. But yeah, through the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum, and my own things, always available to help out.
Good deal. Shall we get started again, Mike?
I think this is a good time, and we'll pick back in. Someone I saw a chat come in about the 500 rule, and we'll. I'm going to be careful not to digress too much on the night photography side, because we'll keep things on the planning. But let's go back to.
Go ahead and digress. We don't mind.
I know. Let's go back to here. I am kind of excited about. This is kind of a new thing to try and demonstrate using a second camera. So, because I'm presenting my whole screen. So, are we good back to so you can see the single image of the lighthouse?
Yeah, you're back.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So here's where things kind of get interesting. So so suppose we're traveling around, or we're in our local neighborhood, wherever that is, and we have a thing like this lighthouse, and it's like, wow, I like this view of this lighthouse. I wonder when the moon's going to rise behind it. In this case, it was like, well, I have this full moon rise on this particular date, and I want to have the lighthouse there, so I got to find a spot to do that. And this particular angle of the lighthouse is okay, but suppose I want to have this view of the lighthouse. So the question then is, if I, instead of having my camera somewhere along the boardwalk here, if I have it on this pier, when should I do it? When are the next full moons, or let's say, it's going to take place for that? And so I'm going to show you how to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, I'm going to establish our scene to be our lighthouse at the end of the pier, like we did before. And now we're going to use this tool that's called the Sun and the Moon Finder tool, which does precisely as it suggests. It allows you to search for dates and times when the moon is going to be where you want it to be. Check this out. You use this icon right here, this little hand icon. Once you've selected this tool, which is this button right here, you select this icon right here, and then you literally, this is what pops up. The finger drags on the viewfinder to define the searching area where the sun or the moon will appear. So then you just simply drag it over this top of the lighthouse and say, I want to find out when the moon is going to appear right here. Planet, tell me when that's going to happen. And I also want to say, oh, I want to search over the next year. This was a year ago, so I apologize for that. But when it did this search between February of 2019 and February of 2020, I guess a couple of years ago now, it found 4 results. How crazy is that? And when you click on those 4 results, it tells you, well, one of them is, November the 13th at 5:54 p.m. One of them is December 11th at 4:40 p.m. and so forth. It gives you the dates and the times and all the details about, where the moon's going to be. And so all you want to do, if you want to check them out, is you just click on these little icons, these little orange triangles, and you pick the first one, and it says, oh, the moon's going to be right here at 5:50. If you look at the bottom, 5:54 p.m. on November 13th. That's where the moon's going to be. That seems like a good thing to know. How about the next one down? Well, December 11th, the moon's going to be right just here at 4:40 p.m. So it's a little bit earlier in the evening. So it's evening blue hour. The sun has just set. Whereas in November, this is more in, I think, civil or nautical twilight. And then in January, the moon's going to be here. It's again back in probably nautical twilight. And here we're back. Even as the sun, the sun might not even have set at this point. So yeah, the sun's above the horizon here, as you can see on the right. So it's so you get all these different features of the. Oh, you can tell by the elevation angle what stage of twilight we're in. Anyway, you can use this tool to figure out exactly where you want the moon to be. And let's go with this date here. Let's choose November 13th, 2019. And what we can see here is by very carefully adjusting the time. Look at this. These simulations are 3 minutes apart. 5:50 p.m., 5:53 p.m., 5:56 p.m. You're controlling this. You can see exactly where the moon is going to be. You can say, well, do I want the moon to be to the right of the lighthouse, or I want it to be to the left, or I want to try to capture it, straddling the lighthouse, that sort of a thing. And it's just incredible that your ability to do this with the Planet Pro app. And then you can also change the appearance of your shot using a different focal length lens. You might decide you want to have a very wide angle lens or wider lens, like a 55 millimeter or 100 millimeters or 200 millimeters or 300 millimeters or even more, to find out exactly what focal length to use. So at the end of the day, you can say, well, this is my plan. On this day, I'm going to go and put my tripod right just there. I'm going to use this focal length. I'm going to point it at the lighthouse. And at this particular time, I know if the skies are clear, I'm going to capture the full moon exactly at that location. There's nothing left to luck. And so back to that, if you think back to that New York Post comment, it's like, Mike Shaw was lucky enough to capture it. You can see that there was really not a lot of luck involved because it was so carefully planned out in advance. The only thing was really uncertain was the weather. So let's talk briefly about this case study, because this is another way to use the app. And this is, if you've ever been here, light painting is now prohibited. This is, I was doing this shot of the Milky Way over the arch, and some other people were using their headlights several years ago, and I was like, that's kind of a nice shot. But that's the arch. And, the question is, I wanted to have Orion inside of it. So the question is, when should I go and where should I stand? And so here is so in order to do the planning, I need to know the dimensions. Well, the ranger station, I went to the ranger station to ask if they had any information about the arch dimensions. They're like, oh, sure. And they pulled out this 6-inch thick binder of everything about the park. And sure enough, they have all these different arch dimensions. And I was looking at the north window, which is 93 feet wide and 51 feet in height. And so I estimated that to be a certain distance off the ground. I entered that into the Planet app, as you saw before. And then I simply, played around with the camera position, as you can see here on the left, to, fiddle around to figure out where should I stand with my wide angle lens, 14 millimeters, to capture this. And I came up with this location, which was actually quite different than what I thought. I thought I was going to stand more in front of the arch, which is like over here. But this is where the app said to be. And so I said, okay, well, that's where I'm going to stand. So I looked down at my feet and I saw this characteristic rock. And I said, Mike, you need to come by this rock at later tonight, which I did. And, sure enough, this is when that lovely couple came by the arch. It was 9:52 p.m. And and the focal length was 14 millimeters, and that's what we got. And it's just incredible. I mean, it was, watching Orion rise into position, never forget it. It's just one of those incredible events that, just sticks with you. So that was another great example. So again, this was the plan. On this date, on this time, I know exactly where to stand to capture Orion in that arch. All right. So we've seen a few of these different, examples. And I think now you have a better appreciation for how I was able to actually capture them and set them up. So this is the St. Paul moon example, the barn example. This is a marker. I just went to the aerial view, the satellite view of the barn, and estimated its height and its width. Mount Whitney, straight off the map database. The arch you saw, and this is the Split Rock Lighthouse, or the Ellingston Island example with the star trails arching over it that we saw at the beginning. It was a very straightforward thing to do. It's just a matter of fine-tuning the camera position. There's even these deep sky objects, like I mentioned. Several of the more prominent Messier objects and are included along with the planets and everything else. So it's really a very, very powerful, encompassing app for doing the planning. So we talked about the sky priority and foreground priority planning, how to use the planet app to plan these things out. The last thing I want to leave you with briefly is your night shooting planning, how to really finish this off. And this is what I was talking about at the beginning. So this is a fairly short section. I think this is probably not going to be news to anyone, but the key thing, in addition to what I've already explained, is when do I really begin the night? And the answer to all of us is typically at sunset. And I just wanted to show this image of the sun disappearing behind the Pacific Ocean. And this was back in 2007 or 2008 now. I was looking for the green flash. I was able to catch a little bit of it. But this is not sunset. This is not sunset. This is not sunset. This is sunset. You can see just a tiny little bit of the sun at the horizon. And that is the definition of sunset. So the time when this takes place, or maybe even just a few seconds afterwards, that's the moment of sunset. And that's when our night shooting plan really begins, at least in my mind. So, so we have our three phases of twilight: civil, nautical, and astronomical, full darkness. And the point I want to make, especially from an astronomy point of view, is each of these three phases of twilight has value. I mean, so in civil twilight, is a great time to shoot, the so-called belt of Venus, or the Earth's shadow, or the moon. In this case, the crescent moon. Nautical twilight is a wonderful time to start shooting, is when the stars first become visible, and you get some very ethereal star images with these beautiful colors of nautical twilight. And of course, astronomical twilight is when the Milky Way, for example, really starts to become visible in the evening. And these, nautical and astronomical twilights are some of my favorite times for capturing images, just because the colors are so profound and so beautiful. So,
hey, Mike.
Yes.
Sorry, Ron asked a question.
Oh, sure.
In the arch shot, how did you determine exposure time and aperture to get good light on the foreground and a good sky shot? And then he followed that up with asking, or is that massaged in Photoshop afterward?
Oh, so no massaging here. Ask the question again. I want to make sure I get it just right.
How did you determine exposure time and aperture to get good light on the foreground and a good sky shot?
Very good question. Okay, so the single exposure, there was some massaging in Photoshop to bring out the shadows, but not a whole lot. I mean, it was really a matter of, this is where the planning came in. So I wanted to have a little bit of crescent moonlight on the arch, but not so much that it overpowered the arch. Like, I don't know if you remember back to that image of me looking at the arch. The arch was much brighter. And, it was just my standard, if I remember correctly, it was like about a 20-second, this is on my Instagram account. So if you go to @MikeShaw Photography on Instagram, I think I included the exposure detail. But 20-second exposure, most likely, ISO probably 12,800, very high. And an aperture of about 3.5. And from a depth of field point of view, I mean, there may be some softness down here from an out of focus foreground, but even with a 14 millimeter lens and an aperture of f3.5, the near focus distance is actually fairly close. So I always focus directly on the night sky, and with that condition met, then the rest of everything just naturally fell within the in focus region of the depth of field.
So if I could ask Mike.
Yes.
So I could ask Mike, so you set your depth of field, so you get a deep depth, keep it to a half second or quarter second, and then whatever aperture that gives you or whatever shutter speed that gives you?
Let me back up a step just to be clear. So this is about a 20-second exposure. So my general approach is super high. I mean, this is a dark sky location, so I'm going for maximum everything. So 12,800 ISO, 20 seconds with a 14 millimeter lens doesn't get very much star motion, and then an aperture of around f2.8, f3.2, f3.5, something like that.
Mike, Chris asked a question. Kind of want to follow up to this. You take a couple of test shots? So maybe speak to how you do your setup.
Oh, great question. Yeah, tons of test shots. I mean, I'm snapping furiously away, so I probably have several hundred shots from this whole, because you never know you never know beforehand which one's going to work out, and conditions always change. So I was shooting from, probably, I'll just say probably several hundred different shots, and then after the fact, it was like, well, that's the one that's going to work. And then I'm sort of finessing the exposure as Orion becomes visible, and it's like, is this the one? Is this the one? Am I going to capture the if you see the bow from the bow and arrow, you can just see the very top of the bow there. So it's really just it's a very exciting, adrenaline-packed few minutes when it all comes together. I'll say that.
And then Michael Cover asked, do you favor fast shutter over stopping down for crisp corners?
Great question. Okay, so the issue with shooting wide open is you end up with a coma defect at the periphery of the image, and it's problematic. So everything in photography, it's a trade-off. So that's why my fast lenses are typically f2.8 for this shot. It's a 14 to 24 zoom. f2.8 is minimum aperture, and at f2.8 there is some notice. It's a Nikon. It's a 14 to 24, so there is some very noticeable coma. At 3.2 and 3.5, it really helps fix that problem. But I rarely shoot at night at f4 or anything more stop down than f4. So, was there a second part of the question?
No. Mike, David then comes back and asks, did you ask the couple to post still for 20 seconds?
I did, and they did. Yeah, it was phenomenal. I mean, I said, you got to be motionless. I had them do, there was enough time to do 5 or 6 of these poses, and then the moon set, and it was all over.
Cool. Well, we're caught up on questions again.
Okay, thanks, Suresh. Great job in managing all of this. So, yeah, so for the night shooting plan, then all I really wanted to say was, it's when I go to assemble a night shooting, I usually have at least half a dozen very specific projects I want to try to accomplish in a given night, depending on the month and the time of year. And so what I do is I start by everyone's version of this is going to be, I'm sure, different, but I just indicate the moment of sunrise and sunset, the phases of twilight, as you can see here. And then I might say, okay, well, if I want to shoot I know that the Milky Way, the moon sets here on this night, so I'm going to shoot the Milky Way, starting maybe a little bit before moonset until after moonset, before the beginning of astronomical twilight, and all that sort of stuff. So that's when I would be shooting my Milky Way shots, and the moonset would be, of course, right here if I'm shooting the moon setting. Star trails, beautiful thing about star trails, I think star trails are greatly underestimated because you can do those any clear night of the year. Moon, any phase of the moon, any clear night, they're just a great project, so much fun. And then I might find that Orion sets at a very particular time, so that kind of dictates that. And if I want to capture a nebula rising, I want to make sure I have enough time to set up and align the tracker and everything before that takes place. So that's really about it for the night shooting plan. But give it some thought, because you'll find that in the field, This is especially helpful in keeping the progress going as the night progresses and, sleepiness starts to beckon. So you can add your lens, your lens, any recommended lenses and that sort of thing. Last thing I want to do before I open it up for the questions and some demos, hopefully, is just some general date considerations. And this is something that, as astronomers, you're all very familiar with. It all starts with the phase of the moon. I'm sure the very first thing that all of us do when we go to plan things is like, well, what's the moon phase? When's the new moon? When's the full moon? That sort of a thing. There's something for every phase of the moon, certainly throughout the month. And also, if you're not so familiar with this is a graph in my first book showing when the Milky Way core is visible throughout the year from January on the left to December, from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m. And what you can see is that it very much depends on the month for when you can shoot the Milky Way. A lot of times people go out either hoping to shoot the Milky Way or why can't I see the Milky Way, or they'll go out in April at 10 o'clock like where's the Milky Way type of thing. And then this is something else that you can maybe grab a screenshot of or something, but this is something I'm going to be talking a little bit about in a webinar on Monday, where I talk about the best things to shoot throughout the year for nightscapes. And the big difference here, in contrast to observing, is we want them to be close to the horizon. So this is, we don't want them to be 30 degrees or higher. We want them to be hugging the horizon. So this list of constellations by month and stars and the dates of the full and the crescent moons and the visible planets. The crescent moon dates are for the evening. And then the meteor showers and the Milky Way core. So this is just something you might want to think about assembling for your own interests for what you're interested in. Almost there. So again, back to the app. If you want to click on this little question mark, you can get these little YouTube tutorials that I think are, even though I've recorded them in my voice, I think they're actually quite well done, all things considered. So the tutorials are here on my website, mikeshawphotography.com. These are the ones that we've mostly talked about today. There are some photography tools to address the questions of exposure and depth of field, and for doing time lapses and the rule of 500 here under night photography. But yeah, really the plan for today was to go through, many of my workshops are multi-day workshops where we have lots of time to explore these things in detail, but I wanted to give you a taste for what some of that can be like, and then to also learn how you can plan your night photography sessions more successfully and more productively. What's a night shooting plan, differences between night sky priority and foreground priority, and the planning apps and the inspiration. So again, these are my books. There's all kinds of information along these lines in them. And these are my social media links. So if we're not already connected, this is a chance to find me. So I post pretty often, especially on Instagram and Twitter, not so much on Facebook. But yeah, I think that's about it. So I will pause here for questions and see where we are.
Mike, another fantastic job. I think I get the sense that people are really, wow. There's a couple questions right now. Maria Maldonado asks, once you create a marker, how do you save it?
Great question. All right, so I think I'm going to go back to the screen sharing mode of and maybe answer that. Let's get this going first. There's a way to save the. Oh, where'd my mouse go? Oh, lost my mouse. I'm going to say. Can't share your screen. All right, so escape that. Escape this. Bear with me, folks. That just got locked up. There's that. Let's try that again. Here we go. Your entire screen. Yep, want to do that. Allow.
There it is.
It is. Great. All right, so let's go back to this app screen. So here, so if you go to this menu right here in the upper left with the 3 horizontal lines, you tap on that, you're going to get a submenu that has to do with markers. And off to the right of that, there's an option that says save. And if you click on the save, it will save all of the markers that are visible on that screen in a file, or it'll just save it on your phone. Now, on your phone, there's also an option in the settings to allow that to save that information on the cloud, which I would recommend. So that way, if you lose your phone or upgrade, you don't have to recreate everything from scratch.
Excellent. Raj Schmidt's back, and he asks, in that Milky Way sky priority shot early in the presentation, are you correct?
No.
And how did you get such a bright Milky Way with no foreground movement?
Oh, that's a great question. A very common question. And let me just see if I can magically zip back to that part of the talk here. This shot. Is this the shot?
Ron, you want to speak up?
Yeah, sure. No, Mike, it was early on when you compared sky priority to foreground priority.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Good eye on that. Okay, let me find that one.
It's still a good question, though. Were you tracking?
No. This was the other shot, though. There's a special technique that I snuck in there, but this one is a single one. I try to avoid tracking as much as I can because the moment you start tracking, the foreground gets a little blurry. So I try to do everything as a single exposure. And this one, right?
Bingo.
Yeah, this is one of my most proud shots because this is actually a 4-row panorama with 12 shots per row. This is a 36 image panorama, and it's got like 20,000 pixels on each side. So this is a very, very, very high resolution shot. I mean, it could be printed at 15 feet by 15 feet easily. This was shot with a 50 millimeter fast prime lens, and yeah, it's like I think next time we go to I think this is an example in my book where I talk about, my second book where I talk about panoramas. Oh yeah, okay, so I found it. So next time we come back on screen, I'll show you how it was assembled. But yeah, this was done again untracked. Probably, I think they were. Do I say what the exposure time was on each image? Yeah, each image had an exposure time of 10 seconds. Shot at 6400 with an aperture of f2.8. Thank you.
But then, Mike, how did you take all of those images and combine them? I mean, the Milky Way is so bright and so detailed.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it was quite a thing. So this is a very dark location, and it's really because let me do this. Let me exit the show here and stop presenting my screen. Okay, so I'm going to. So this is my second book, Creative Time Lapses, and this is all about achieving results like that you cannot achieve on a single exposure. So this is the result here, and then this is the ensemble of images. So each image, each one of these images is a full frame 10-second image, and by stitching them together, it's kind of a curious thing. So a couple of things going on there. One is that this was shot with a 50 millimeter, very fast prime lens, f1.2, and that lens has terrible coma around the edges when you're shooting relatively fast. So even if I stop down at f2.8, which I did here, there's still some coma around the edge. But the thing is, when you create a panorama and has all of those images together, what happens with enough overlap, the stitching tool, the panoramic stitching tool, only keeps the middle part, which is coma free, because you have so much overlap. So it's like you're cookie cutting out the middle part of each image and assembling those into the panorama. So yes, so the resultant panorama has incredible resolution and detail. So again, it's a great print.
Thank you for that. Jim Knutson asks, what exposure time do you use for star trails, and how do you combine them?
Great question. So the exposure time I want to distinguish between two different things. One is that the exposure time is the way I assemble star trails is it's a great question. It's easy for you to learn how to do this. So all you need to do is to capture a sequence of images, one right after the other. Ways of doing that, and then assembling those in either Photoshop or a free program called StarStax with an X, STARSTAX. And my approach is to, when I create those single exposures, what you want to do is you want to set your exposure time so that each image is a successful standalone image. So for example, if this blazing meteor comes through, you can take that image and process it as an outstanding meteor image. Now, in contrast, back in the film days, you just open your shutter and keep it open while the Earth rotated and then close your shutter. Problem with that is if someone walks through with a headlight or a car headlight flashes through, or you accidentally turn on your cell phone, that light just accumulates in the resultant image, and it's not so great. So, but the important thing is to get enough length of a star trail. You typically want to have at least an hour or two worth of total elapsed time. Now, of course, if you have a 50 millimeter lens or a 70 millimeter lens with a narrower field of view, it doesn't take so long to get the stars to produce a long trail, so you might get by with a shorter time. But for a wide angle lens, like a 14 or 24 millimeter lens, then typically my minimum would be an hour or two, preferably 3 or 4 hours. So the total elapsed time is about 3 or 4 hours, and there's hundreds or thousands of images that go into an individual star trail composite.
Chris White asked, you might want to talk about the 500 rule.
Excellent point. So the 500 rule is just a phenomenological guide to what's the maximum shutter speed you can use with a particular lens and not have discernible star trailing. And it's a pretty good guide. I would recommend more of a 300 rule or even a 100 rule. And the way it works is like this. And this is where I'm going to use this little whiteboard, so hopefully you can see this. So I'm going to call the shutter speed, I'll just call it the shutter speed like this. This is the max, this is the longest shutter speed you can have without having star trails, is literally, that's an X. It's literally the number, I'm going to say 300. It's just a number with no anything, divided by the focal length in millimeters. So if you have a 30 millimeter lens, then the maximum shutter speed would be 10 seconds. If you have a 150 millimeter lens, the maximum shutter speed would be 2 seconds. So it's really just a guide to, how long of a shutter speed. It's a very useful one too, by the way. I mean, I don't mean to. But the other thing to bear in mind is it very much depends on which direction you're looking. So if you're looking due north, then obviously the stars are moving more slowly than if you're looking along the ecliptic, let's say, or due east or due west, where the stars are really moving to cover the same amount of distance. But it's a very useful guide to estimating what the maximum shutter speed is. What I would recommend doing, though, is to take your camera, really any clear night, even in your backyard or nearby park or something. The moon can be up, but just at a particular focal length, just create a series of exposures at 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 15 seconds, 10 seconds, 5, 2, 1 second. And in all of those images, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to see stars. The rest of it doesn't matter. And then at some point, you won't be able to, at some point, you'll start to see star trailing depending on the focal length. And that's the best number to use, is the one that you can live with.
So Mike, it also depends on the type of camera, right? Full frame and APS-C and all that.
For sure. So and this is that's an excellent point. So I should say this is the full frame equivalent. And so what that means is if you have what's like an APS-C sensor or another crop sensor, the idea is that because the sensor is smaller, you have to multiply that by a certain conversion factor to get the equivalent full frame. So for example, if you have a 24 millimeter lens on a crop sensor like a DX for a Nikon, you multiply that by 1.5. 24 times 1.5 would be a 36 millimeter full frame equivalent.
Thank you. Roger Anderson asked, how can I input GPS coordinates into Planet Pro for a location I will be at in the future?
Great question. One thing you can do is either go to that location and just type in just add the marker at that point. I believe you can also, if you tap on the latitude and longitude, you can type in any latitude and any longitude manually.
Valse asks, so how do you handle the foreground star movement when doing the panorama? How did you?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I didn't. And the panorama image editor manages to just sort of blend everything together pretty smoothly. And it's, you know, even though there's a lot of images, I'm moving relatively quickly, and the field of view here is so wide that the incremental motion of the stars isn't very great. So, you know, on a per image basis, I was ensuring that there'd be no significant star motion in those individual images. And then when they get all, you know, blended into this huge wide angle image, then it works out okay. But it's always this is the thing. It's always a balance, and you're exactly right to ask the question, because at some point, you know, if you really zoom in, you say, "Oh, I can see a little bit of star movement," but you know, the benefit is the brightness of the Milky Way. So it's kind of a trade-off.
And then Chris Setness asks, have you used Planet Live in conjunction with Planet Pro?
You know, I have it on my phone. Did some beta testing with it, and I have used it. It's like an in the field type of thing, but I haven't used it very much. So not a lot of experience with it.
That's all the questions that are in the chat. Does anybody else have any other questions? Oh, here's Ron. There's a couple more. Ron says, do you ever consider humidity levels in your horizon shots, getting a little fog on the landscape?
Oh, great question. So I don't, you know, what can you do? So I wrap my camera in hand warmers, you know, just to keep the dew off and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, in terms of planning as an integral part of the shot, I don't. I live with whatever nature throws at me, and hopefully it's clear 9 times out of 10.
So you do actively use a dew removal system?
Yeah, I have either lens heaters. I have the disposable hand warmers and the lens heaters, and well, I'll tell you what. Let me. If it's okay, maybe I can try. I'm kind of curious to do a demo.
Yeah.
Should we get?
Yeah, I think there's time.
Let's give this a try, and again, I hope this works. If it doesn't, then we will go to Plan B.
So while you're setting up, Chris White has one other question.
Sure.
The Orion and couple shot. When did you first visit the site? At the time you took the photo, it's a desert, so you have a bit more leeway versus the north shore and the trees.
You sure do. I would say that I first visited that particular spot. I mean, that's one of the things about gaining an experience with. There we go. So that's on. So as a sort of a philosophy about photography, there's this legend that someone once Ansel Adams, how do you take such great shots? And you say, well, you keep coming back to it every winter for 20 years. And there's a lot of truth to that. And the flip side of that is there was a great article in Outdoor Photographer many years ago about, it was advising us all to be a local hero. It's like, what's a local hero? And the point is that wherever you live, in Minnesota, Wisconsin, anywhere, there is something that you know better than anybody else. And you're able to photograph better than anybody else. And somewhere, someone has no experience with that and would love to see that. And I mean, if you think about the natural, landmarks, landscape of Minnesota, I mean, it's extremely characteristic and photogenic. And, there's no need to travel someplace. And I mean, I love traveling, so don't get me wrong. But, you don't have to restrict yourself to 2 weeks or 3 weeks a year where you travel someplace, do a bunch of photography, and then that's it. It's like, get to know like a nature center or your local environment over a course of time. And, you'll be able to, see more things that you want to shoot. So for that particular shot, I spent probably 2 days scouting it out and talking to the rangers and, planning it out before I actually did that particular shot. So there's that. Okay, so that is on. I'm gonna try a little experiment where we'll just see how this goes. And okay, that's good. All right, so that's on. I'm gonna go here. All right, can you see that okay? Let's tilt that up a little bit. Get that back. So can you see the screen okay? Oh, I can't hear you, Suresh.
Sorry, I think you need to share your screen.
Oh, no problem. Oh, that's an interesting one.
I see it great.
You see it cool?
Yeah, I don't know how to
pin.
So
Mike, if you pin the video, it'll get big.
if I pin the video,
No, if us watching
okay,
pin
I see it.
your profile picture, it will get big.
Thanks, Russ.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. So you can see this. Okay. So, just someone throw out which of those examples was most interesting to you.
Actually, the lighthouse on the pier was pretty good.
Yeah, I like the lighthouse too.
Oh, okay. Well, that's where we are right here. So, just a couple things. Hopefully, you can hear me okay. So this is where we are. You can actually zoom in and zoom out using this slider bar like this on the side. And of course, you can move around. If you tap this menu up here, you can have a normal map like that, which is like a street map. You can tap on the satellite map, which is this. You can do this terrain map, and that's the thing that shows you can see over here the contours. And then one of these over here has I thought had actual contours. So, well, in any event, let's go back to the satellite map here. And so the idea here is that this is the lighthouse. I can really zoom in on that. And I can press and hold on the scene pin and move it around. And then if I press and hold on, or if I tap the marker, that's when you can see oops. I guess that's as far as it goes. That's how you can see the diameter of the circle for the lighthouse. So if we wanted to change that, we could, let's see. We want to edit the marker. Oops, no, we're going to edit the marker. So how do we do that? There should be a pop-up menu that does that. Oh, here we go. There we go. So here it is, 37 feet tall. Let's change this to, oops, done. Let's change that to, I don't know, let's say 20 feet. Okay, so we did that, save it. So now you can see how the diameter of the circle has gotten bigger. Maybe it's too big, I don't know. But in any event, so let's say we want to put the scene marker back there. And if you just tap on this slider just once, like this, 1, 2, 3, tap, it rescales the view so that you can see both the camera and the scene all at one go. All right, so now I'm going to come down here and do the virtual viewfinder like that. And you can see the lighthouse, which is right there. You can see Wisconsin behind it, and you can see the moon. So now you can say, all right, this is where you can really, fine-tune the moon position just by sliding the slider. And you can really get it to be just like you want it. Or you might decide, you know what, I don't want to do a landscape shot, I want to do a portrait shot. So if you just tap over here, you can get this portrait mode. And, you might decide if you have a 550 millimeter, telephoto, that might be the way to go. But like I said, I mean, the finder option is, I'm going to click over here. Let's suppose that I wanted to, move this where's the thing? Ah, I'm doing this in a landscape mode, so it's not, where did my, oh, here we go. I can move this around at least. Oh, I have to apologize. This is, normally I do this in a portrait mode, and so all the menus are a little bit offset, so I don't know if that's going to actually work out that well. But anyway, this is the window. You saw how to use it.
Can you turn your tablet?
I can. Let me just do that and see if it's still. There we go. Let's just do that. Let's see how well that works out. Huh. Let's try this again. Wow, this is like, kind of really acting, this is classic, isn't it, for a demo? Let's go back to here. There we go. There we go. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see that. Okay. Let me just redo that.
Yeah,
there we go. All right. So, so this is the thing. So if you extend this region, if you look up here, it says searching and found 14 results. So if I use a bigger window, and I can just kind of tap through them. And there, for some reason, this isn't showing up. So anyway, I'm gonna bail on that. Well, there we go. So that was the less than successful demo.
Let me ask you, as you still have it up there, if you're, like, say, at home and you want to set up a shot, say, at the lighthouse up near Duluth,
yeah,
you set it all up. Is there a way that the app pings you as you're getting closer to the perfect location? Like on the left side of your screen there, where you've got the location where you're standing.
Oh yeah, no, I don't. There's no sort of audible signal to that. This is something that you just literally have to kind of play around with. So
if you're like in a state park or national park and you set up your shot, you're gonna have to find that spot on your own. This thing doesn't tell you.
Yeah, but bear in mind that you can do all that in your armchair at home.
Yeah.
Oh, but in terms of like, well, okay, so what you do there is, I see the question you're asking. So what you would do is you would take the latitude and longitude and then actually enter that into, if you have a GPS, you can enter that into a GPS device.
Yeah.
And then use that to generate some sort of an audible signal.
Cool. Yeah, I guess that would work.
Well, I also have to confess, this is the very first time I've used this app with the with my tablet. I was hoping the bigger screen would let's see if we can do a let's see if we do this.
Would it be helpful to use your phone instead?
It would, but I'm not sure if that's going to be the way to go. So this is the, so you can see here with the, let's go back to a landscape mode. So this is how you can sort of, if we wanted to have the Milky Way, for example, over the lighthouse, you can see, this is a 14 millimeter, whoops. This is with a 14 millimeter lens, landscape orientation. And let's say that we really decided that we liked that composition for some reason. And then we could say, okay, you can see this green fan that actually shows the field of view. And you can rotate that fan to point in different directions. So, for example, if we really wanted to get the lift bridge, which is this thing right here, in there, then we might, you can see how the Milky Way is moving around. So now it might be behind the lift bridge. And if we go to the virtual viewfinder, we could add, let's say we add a marker here. Just to get a sense of where it is. There's a little red pin right here. So the Milky Way would be essentially right behind the lift bridge. So there's just any number of different ways that you can go about using the virtual capabilities of and then the different tools. Let me see if I can swipe that down. Anyway, there's any different number of ways you can use the tool to do the different plans. But anyway, I'll leave that there in case anyone has any specific questions about any of the other planning techniques.
Yeah. So, Mike, going back to my question a minute ago about the GPS coordinates, is there a way to copy? Like, is there a button for copying GPS location to bring it into Google Maps or something?
Absolutely. So let me show you how to do that. So, so these are the coordinates. So I think these are the different coordinates, the different formats. So I can, if I just press and hold, I get this menu. I don't know if you can see it, but it says copy, save to Dropbox, save to files, messages. I can mail it to somebody.
Perfect.
And I've actually done this on a few occasions where I've done planning with somebody and I've emailed them a set of coordinates that they've used. It's basically just a Google Map pin that you can then use to do that.
And then Ron Schmidt piggybacks on that and asks, does Planet Pro give you a GPS generated "you are here" like blue dot like Google Maps does?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, it does. I'm not showing it because it's my house, but if you just click on this little, if you click on that little icon right there,
yep,
it will bring you to where you are.
Okay, Ron, does that answer your question? Yep, he's happy.
Yeah, and that's actually a pretty useful way to. So maybe I see where you're going with that. So yeah, you could actually. It gives you the standard little blue dot of Google Maps, and in the field I've used that to find my way to a location, like if I'm in Utah, it's completely off the grid. And I'll say also this does work even though you have no internet signal because it's using the GPS satellite signals, and you can navigate quite successfully using that technique.
Great. Guys, are there any other questions? We're coming up to the top of the hour here. Did we cover anything, or did we miss anything that you wanted to have answered, or any questions like that? Mike, I think that's it. I think here's Rashmit's asking about the ISS. Is there a way?
Yeah, interesting question. So, as far as I know, there's no satellite predicting capabilities in there, but I'll show you what I use for that is a program called Sputnik, and I'll just show that to you on my phone. And yeah, and the nice thing about it is if you.
But I think Ron is asking in terms of lining up the ISS for landscape shot or something.
Oh yeah, no, that's not built into. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's not built into Planet at present.
So one thing to consider also is when the ISS is low on the horizon, like many of your shots are, it's a lot dimmer than it is when it's higher up, right? So it's almost not even visible.
That's right, yeah. And it's also, the other interesting thing about it is that if it's very early in the evening, if it's in the brighter stages of civil twilight, a well-exposed civil twilight image is not bright enough to even register. Mm-hmm. It's like a nautical twilight and an astronomical twilight is best for that. So, well, yeah, but look, it's been absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's been some great questions, and certainly look forward to, if anyone has any questions, you can follow up with me on my email address, mike@mikeschaff@photography.com, or, connect over social media. But it's a real honor to have this opportunity to present today. So thank you, Suresh and Vaults, for the support and everything. And certainly look forward to seeing you again when we get back into the, back in person.
Mike, I really appreciate it. I think everybody here appreciates it. There's a lot of thank yous in the comments I'm reading here. Very well appreciated. So everybody, I welcome you to bookmark MikeSchauphphotography.com. This is a very popular topic. I think I saw 66 as the highest number of attendees here. So that's that is our biggest virtual presentation so far for the BSIG. I think it's only second to your last presentation, Michael. I think you had 70. So it's a really popular topic. I'll just finish up here by mentioning that our next BSIG presentation is scheduled for Saturday, February 13th at 1 o'clock. Dave Faulkner, our former club president, will be presenting Mythology of the Night Sky. I'll just read a quick synopsis of it. Most of the constellations we see from the Northern Hemisphere have their roots in Greek and Roman mythology. Dave will talk about the history leading up to the naming of the constellations, some of the stories found in the constellation, and how they relate to life in ancient Greece and Rome. He will also talk about the tradition of naming solar system objects based on Greco-Roman mythological characters, one significant deviation from that, and how in more recent times the naming convention has expanded to other mythologies. So with that, I want to say again, thank you, Mike, for everything. I look forward to someday hanging out with you under guys and doing some of this. And yeah, again, both just for the group, we'll also be adding this recording to the BSIG forum on the MAS website probably the next day or two. And if you have any questions, all right, everybody.